So I want to thank Curtis and Ken for being here to deliver this webinar today. And Curtis, I'll turn the time over to you.
Thank you, Sean. Appreciate it. I will be giving the first part of the webinar, and I will turn it over to Ken Sheffey, who will take it from there. I wanted to start out by making the comment that one of the factors that have contributed to the quality of the soil survey program, the National Cooperative Soil Survey Program, is standards. Standards across the United States, whether they're standard definitions, such as a BT horizon in North Carolina would convey the same concept as a BT horizon in Arizona, and also standards in the methodology of making soil surveys. So one of the very important pillars of standards in soil survey is the Soil Survey Manual. And it is one of 4 pillars, and it may be the most important pillar. But in addition to the Soil Survey Manual, we have the handbook, which deals more with procedures and policies. We have taxonomy, which provides a language for us to communicate about the types of soils that exist on the landscape. And we also have the laboratory manual. So if you're doing base saturation using one method, you may get different results than if you do base saturation using another method. And so here they are, just a picture of the 4 pillars of standards. And what we'll be discussing today is the Soil Survey Manual. So we'd like to start out with history. Where did it come from? And here are the 4 Soil Survey Manuals side by side. The first one on the left that you can hardly see, it's thin, was generated in 1937. Then we have the one next to it that was generated in 1951. Then next to it is the 1993 version. Then the one that we'll be discussing mainly today, and that's the 2017 version. So the 1937 version by Charles Kellogg is shown on the right, but when I took this photograph, I also photographed a publication by Charles Kellogg that came out the year before. And the reason I did that is if you compare these side by side, there is a lot of material in both. There's common material in both, such as horizon nomenclature. The big difference is the one on the left, the development and significance of the great soil groups of the United States, deals more with pedology. It deals more with the factors that had given rise to the different soils, the 5 soil forming factors, but it also deals with the processes: calcium carbonate accumulation, leaching, eluviation of clay, organic matter accumulation. But then the manual, the one on the right that we're discussing, is really a how-to book. And both of these are building on a time period when Curtis Marbut had taken on the leadership role of soil science in many respects. And this photograph basically shows how he is handing the baton to Charles Kellogg. And so Curtis Marbut was building on earlier work by Whitney and so forth, but his big intellectual contribution, as many people know, is that he had taught himself German so that he could translate Glinka's work. And Glinka was Russian, so he had the Russian concepts of zonality, bioclimatic zones, desert soils being different than forest soils, being different than grassland soils. So that had been translated into German, and then Curtis Marbut taught himself German and translated it to English. So here we have a continuum of these basic concepts. But the thing that's unique, I think, about the National Cooperative Soil Survey is the number of people who have actually walked the landscape, digging holes, making maps, and beginning in the late 1800s through the early 20th century. This is examples of people actually looking at soils, digging holes, making maps. Here we are, the 1910 to 20, and most of these maps were made county by county, and going through the 30s, and then so that was the material upon which these early, we call them first generation soil surveys, were made. And so the soil survey manual basically was capturing that information and organizing that information and putting it into a how-to situation. So just some examples. The picture on the upper right is a schematic about horizon designation at that time in the 30s. On the lower right is how-to, a suggestion on how to do field notes. And then the picture that I really thought was quite artistic is a recommendation on how to sample soils. Okay, and it shows a nice soil pit with steps going down into it, but a how-to manual. Okay, so if we plot the, just to get a sense of the soil survey activity, those published in the, pre-1940, we call those first generation. Then you can see how things quieted down during the Depression and during the war, but after the war, you had a lot of the World War II vets coming back, and in 1951, you had the next soil survey manual, and it gave rise pretty much to the second generation of soil surveys, shown as an example, Lancaster County, Nebraska. And so, like Generation 1, very much agricultural focus, but in addition to that, there were other land uses like expanding suburbia. And one of the major differences is a technological advance in aerial photography. So it's not just walking the landscape, but it's looking at landscapes with stereo pair aerial photography where you can see 3 dimensions. Okay, so that's the 1951 Soil Survey Manual, and if we look at some of its contents, you can see the emphasis on aerial photography, but what, in my opinion, is very interesting about reading that manual is the history. So now soil survey has existed long enough that it has a history. And we, unlike the 1937 manual, who we know wrote it, we know that Charles Kellogg wrote it, we don't know exactly who wrote the 1951 manual. It is now the soil survey staff. So if anyone out there has any insight about who actually wrote this, but I bring it up because the first section on the early concepts and the history is just an excellent review of who wrote it. Some people say that it might have been Roy Simonson, but if we could get some documentation about that, that'd be real valuable to know. Okay, 1950s. Here we are. You can see the Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA, funded a lot of soil survey during the Depression, and that shows up as a pattern. Then we hit the 60s, and then the 70s, and then the 80s, and the 90s. Things are starting to quieten down a little bit. And but you hit the 90s, and now we have the next soil survey manual. And that manual is starting to evolve one thing that really captures your attention is in the appendix, and now we're entering the big data era, or at least we're entering a period where there is a huge amount of quantitative lab data. And you can also see from the photograph of the table of contents that it has expanded into interpretations. So interpretations now is a bigger part other than just how to actually make the soil surveys per se. Okay. And then the one that we're talking about today, the 2017, and Ken Sheffey will be talking about that in more detail. But before I turn it over to Ken, I wanted to point out that the purpose has really remained fairly constant. So in 1937, the manual was intended for soil surveyors in the field. In 51, it was intended for soil scientists engaged in soil classification and mapping. In 93, again, making and using soil surveys, but now we have an emphasis on interpretations of soil survey. And this one also primarily soil scientists making soil surveys, but in addition, we also hope that it is used by teachers and researchers and students in soil morphology, soil geography, ecology, geomorphology, and the list would go on and on and on, such as wetland scientists, foresters, and agronomists. And in this case, not so much about how to make a soil survey, but how to interpret what's in a soil survey. That's primarily the focus. So why publish it now? Well, we are in or passing through a digital revolution, and we know how it's changed everything. Just imagine how it's changed how we shop, for example. But it has also changed soil survey. We have big databases. We have GIS forms of the soil maps. We have web soil survey. We have lots of different technological tools and remote sensing, and also the demands on the data. A lot of modelers need soil survey information to plug into their various types of models. Why did we make a printed copy if we're in the digital revolution? Well, a few reasons. One is we wanted some stability. We didn't want the ship to be able to be too agile, to turn too much. We wanted definitions to persist long enough until new definitions have been vetted and approved and reviewed. And then just following the traditional way, credibility with respect to peer review. It's easier to peer review manuscripts in the traditional way that have a page limit than it is to peer review something online that really has no boundaries and can, it be quite expansive. And the other thing was just to actually have a hard deadline for completion and a tangible goal. So we said we want this new manual to look like the old manual in terms of its size and its scientific quality, in terms of the paper quality, and we had a tangible goal to shoot at. And it was a lot easier to review. Okay. So I want to turn it over to Ken Sheffey to take it from here, but I did want to just say one thing about Chapter 1, and it lays out a lot of the primary definitions, but I highlighted soil as a natural three-dimensional body because even though we have new technological tools where we can assess almost continuously slope, different bandwidths, and changes over short temporal scales, still the business is what's out there on the landscape. How do we envision it? Do we still envision it as a three-dimensional body, like to use the analogy of lake, it's a three-dimensional body, but these soils are comparable to these three-dimensional bodies, and we wanted to emphasize that at the beginning. And so that brings us up to through Chapter 1, and at this point I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Ken Sheffey, who will continue on.
Okay, thank you, Curtis. This is, of course, the 4th edition of the Soil Survey Manual, and this one builds upon the work that was done earlier. In Chapter 1 dealt a lot with the history of the developments in soil survey, as well as the scientific foundation by which it is being used. And also talks about the evolution of the soil survey program and the what's now the National Cooperative Soil Survey Program. It is similar to the previous editions, but goes ahead and expands upon it and brings everything up to date. Chapter 2 for the Soil Survey Manual, Landscapes, Geomorphology, and Site Descriptions. This was originally included in the old Chapter 3 in the 1993 version, but that Chapter 3 had grown to about 150 pages in length, and it became recognized that we're actually talking about two different things. And so what we did, we split out this portion about the site data from the old Chapter 3. And some of the things that it talks about, and it's things that, when you are going to go out and begin to do an inventory of the landscape, you need to consider things such as scale and how that affects what you do and how you go about doing it. And so that's a very good addition that we have been able to put in. And one of the other principal things it does, it puts the descriptive terms that have evolved that we use in geomorphology, landscapes, landforms, land cover, and plant communities. It puts them into our standard document. So now we have defined terminology that we can use. The old Chapter 3 still contains much of the same content. Chapter 3 is the examination and the description of soil profiles, and that's the pit on itself. That's down in the pit. And one of the principal things it does is define the terminologies and the classes that are used in describing soil. It includes the horizon designations and some of the properties and features that are common that you'll see in the block descriptions of soils, including depth, structure, moisture, color, texture, roots, etc., etc. So it basically is set out to define the terminology that we are going to use, and we would like to see others use also. That gives us that one common language that we can rely upon. Chapter 4. Well, what we have done in the new Chapter 4 is we combine some of the information from the previous Chapter 2 and the current, and the previous Chapter 4 into one chapter. And it is actually describing the soil mapping concepts and the process that it takes to create a map. We talk about the mapping process itself, the equipment and tools that are required. We talk about the aggregation, the segmentation and the aggregation of the landscape into soil map units and the kinds of map units. We talk about the soil as a component. A soil series is a concept, but a soil component is a real body on the landscape. And assemblage of the real bodies on the landscape into components form map units. And that's one of the key concepts that we hope that people are able to understand and pick up when they read the manual this time. Included in this also, we talk about the various orders of soil survey that are designed on the basis of what the purpose and what the needs are. Your order of the survey determines the design of the map units. Something new that we have added in this chapter is the soil correlation process. At one time, soil correlation was making sure that your major soils had the same classification from one location to another. But soil correlation goes much deeper now than it has before. And it includes correlation of plant communities, correlation of landscapes, etc. Another part that we've added is the quality control and the quality assurance processes that we utilize in soil survey to assure that what we do today and what we do here will be similar to what was done yesterday and what will be done tomorrow. So we do get quite extensive in our quality control and quality assurance. One of the new chapters in the manual this time, and it comes about because of the digital revolution that Curtis had mentioned, is digital soil mapping. This is not the final word. This introduces a lot of new terminology and concepts and principles that will be used in the application of digital mapping in soil survey. The one thing I realized after reading this chapter and learning so much from it is we are at the crux of a paradigm shift in how we conduct soil survey. These new tools give us new capacities to not only to inventory and to precisely place features upon the landscape, and also to display and to do analysis of these same soils and landscapes. We're looking at something completely different. The things that we used to do in our mind when you would go out on a technical assistance and help support someone and you're telling them about their soil survey, we are now going to have tools that we will be able to utilize so that people can walk through this themselves. It's a new paradigm. It's quite exciting, and good luck to everybody who's going to be doing this. It's going to be a challenge. Another one of the new chapters, and this is one of them, when we started out, it was, I didn't know exactly where this was going to go. We had engaged a couple of geophysicists and geophysical specialists in this, and it became pretty evident that they had some pretty nice tools that save us time, money, and a lot of sweat. You don't have to dig holes. If you don't have to dig holes, it can certainly save you a lot of each of those. So we have a very extensive treatment on some of the geophysical tools that are now available, including ground penetrating radar, X-ray fluorescence, electromagnetic induction, the optical spectroscopies like mid-range infrared spectroscopy, and VNIR for the visible and near infrared. That's what we've used in our carbon mapping program, and as well as electrical resistivity that are covered extensively in respect to the applications in soil survey. There are additional ones like magnetometry and a few others I don't understand that are introduced in this chapter by these specialists, and we are looking for applications of them in the soil survey program, of course. Chapter 7 is soil survey data collection, management, and dissemination. Basically, we made a lot of major advances since 1993, and that is a lot of that due to the fact that we now have computers that we can collect data with, we can analyze data with, and we can manipulate output with. Some of the things that this covers is the rationale behind data management systems, and gives you some good advice upon performing records management. It introduces or it reintroduces a number of our standard forms that we utilize in the U.S. in the soil survey program. It gives a good treatment on soil information systems related to data collection, data analysis, and data dissemination. And we now have a number of tools for delivering data that we did not before, and this goes into much of that detail. Well, one of the parts of this chapter I think is especially interesting is the history of data management in the U.S. Some of you may have been around when all we had was the official series description and the soil information record to go on. And after that point, everything was hand-generated, hand-typed, and handwritten that was put into the soil survey report. That would have been up until, I guess, maybe the mid-90s, or mid-80s when that was being done. Then we adopted the State Soil Survey Database and the Map Unit Information Record. And that served us for about 10 years and served as a transition. And we first got into actually managing and manipulating digital information and numeric data for soil surveys. And of course, the latest is the NASA's data system that we use today, and our soil survey geographic database called SURGO. Chapter 8 is soil survey interpretations, and this is an enhancement of what we had before. There was an introduction and discussion, as Curtis mentioned, of soil interpretations in the 1993 handbook, but it's taken it a step beyond in this chapter. At that time in '93, we had non-limiting, moderately limiting, and severely limiting were the only thing we could say about the suitability of a soil for a particular use. But now with the use of various kinds of models and various used and the number of data elements that can be entered into those models, we get a number of different types of interpretations and precision. A greater degree of specificity to the interpretations is now available using these models. And of course, the models are based upon measured and observed properties, and they are designed for specific land uses and applications of the information. Again, based upon real properties and specific applications. Chapter 9 is one of the new chapters, again, in the Soil Survey Manual. This is the assessing of dynamic soil properties and soil change. A very important thing, these are the properties that change on the human time scale. These are the things that whenever we go out and we do something to manipulate the soil, it has an impact upon that property or quality. It includes such things as the nutrient status, soil moisture and temperature, density, soil organic carbon, pH, microorganisms, etc. This chapter outlines the various designs and data collections and analyses that can be utilized in the assessment of dynamic soil properties. And I was always very much intrigued by this and excited because all of modern agriculture and our NRCS conservation programs are dependent upon the manipulation of dynamic properties. If you think about that, if you're fertilizing, you're manipulating a dynamic property. If you're irrigating, it's a dynamic property. If you're going to do conservation work, if you're trying to restore infiltration, you're going to be manipulating one of the dynamic properties of the soil. So our whole agricultural business is centered around these dynamic properties and knowing what they are, how they got where they are, and what we can do to improve them. Chapter 10 is another one of the new chapters in the manual, and it deals with subaqueous soil surveys, and it describes the subaquatic soil environment, which is totally different than the subaerial, of course. One of the things it does for us is it's a whole different world if you're going to do subaqueous soil mapping. So it's all new survey techniques, methods of description, sampling, characterization, and classification of the soil. It's all follows similar thought lines, but it's a different process entirely. One of the things that Chapter 10 does, it describes the tools and technologies that are brought to bear. And we were fortunate to have some folks who had some good experience in that contributing to this effort. Chapter 11 is also one of the new chapters. It deals with the human-altered and human-transported soil materials. When man uses the soil, we change its nature. And sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. And that's why it becomes important that we know what we have done and what the impacts are. One of the things Chapter 11 does for us is it gives us the new terminologies and the new classes for the description and the assessment, the interpretation of human-altered and transported soil materials. It provides a good overview of the methods and procedures that are used in these environments where you would be doing these surveys, and a lot of these, they range from urban and suburban areas to perhaps mining activity, areas of mining activity. So it hits the full gamut. Another important part of this is because this is an altered environment, it points out a lot of the resource concerns and for management issues. as well as the safety concerns in conducting soil surveys in these environments. We kind of changed the thought on what the appendices were before. It's some of what was in the old manual, but not the same information, but of the same type. But as I was thinking about this and we were working on it, it became apparent to me, it's like we go through 11 chapters talking about how to go about making a soil survey, what you have to record, what you have to note, how you organize yourself, how you present it, how you provide information to the users. And I thought, well, gee, it seems like we should have a tool for that. And it's like, hey, we do. We do have tools for that. And so we've dedicated the appendices to kind of demonstrating some of these tools that we use to disseminate information about soils. The first is the official soil series description. It's been around for a while, but it is now much more available and much more accessible for users. We wanted to show a detailed map unit description, what it is that we generate as a process of conducting a soil survey, segmenting a landscape into management units and what that consists of. Appendix 3 is one of the jewels. It's the soil survey characterization database. How many samples have been run through the lab here? 20, 30,000 pedons, probably something like that, have gone through this laboratory, and we have all that data available online for users. And Appendix 3 simply highlights an example of that information that's available. Appendix 4 is the web soil survey itself. It kind of walks you through accessing it and some of the various ways that information is displayed, both in a map of soil map units, the kind of the traditional thing that you've probably seen plenty of, the thematic maps of either soil properties or soil uses and limitations are included. Then, of course, you have your tabular data. And probably one of the big things about the web soil survey that's becoming more and more important is the integration of ecological site information, so the plant communities that can be displayed in the web soil survey. And I thought it was important that this is where we gather our information. This is the analysis we provide for users, that this be a part of the manual to show what it is you get when you do things the way that we describe in the first 11 chapters. So, we got it published. Yay, we're done. Well, for the most part, yes, this manual is done. Where do we go from here? The cycle starts anew. As we started working on the manual this time, and that was only about 4 years ago, I was going back through notes that had been made by people 10 years prior to that on things that they wanted to put into the next manual. So this is the process we will continue with. There's always going to be a need for greater precision and accuracy and completeness of soils data. There are going to be technical advances in how we do inventories and how we analyze and we deliver the soil survey information. New information because we're going to have new users. Every day there are more and more people in more and more industries that rely upon the data that we can provide to them. One of the critical things to all this, of course, is where do we go from here is the maintenance of the technical standards that we have. It does take a lot of effort and some diligence to maintain soil survey information throughout time and to maintain the standards by which we conduct it. And that's basically a synopsis. The soil survey manual, we now have it available. You can get a hard copy, print it and bound. It's the same footprint as the previous editions of the soil survey manual.
That was quick.
And you can get it through the NRCS Distribution Center in Ames, Iowa. You can either just Google NRCS Distribution Center and do a search on Soil Survey Manual, and you'll find it, or use the web address given there. We just recently, with our editors, they got it done for us. They got a digital download available. So you can access the Soil Survey Manual online. It's hyperlinked, it's indexed, and it's organized. It's very, very quick and easy to use. So please take advantage of this. Again, we have not an unlimited supply, but we'd certainly like to see anyone who would like to have a hard copy, a bound copy of the Soil Survey Manual to obtain one. And for those who are casual users or maybe only have need for it on an irregular basis, to be sure and grab a digital download of a copy of the manual. And this is a long effort. We started with this on a continuous process about 4 years ago. And I'd like to thank all the authors, contributors, the reviewers, the editors, and even our leadership for having provided us with their expertise and their skills and their financing and their support, and they allowed us the time to create this 4th edition of the manual. You know, what it does for those who have contributed and been a part of this, it makes you part of the long legacy of the innovators and the leaders of the soil survey program in the U.S. So I want to thank everybody who may be listening that had a part in that. And I think that's all I have for us today.
All right, so we'll give people online a chance to compose their questions, and if you would put those into the Q&A pod. So we do have some that have come in already. And there's a question, did the part about consociations, complexes, and undifferentiated groups get removed? And if so, why?
No, it did not, because it's very critical.
And that's covered in Chapter 4.
It's Chapter 4. And Sean would know, because Sean was one of the principals in producing that.
Oh, sorry, I should have read ahead. It says, never mind, I got it.
No, that's one of the big things. And, you know, Chapter 4 covers how we got where we are today. And if you're going to advance it in the future to digital or raster-based mapping and interpretations of properties, you got to know where you came from to know where you're going to be going. And so that's what the principal need for Chapter 4 was.
So the question is, the PowerPoint available for download? And both the recording of the webinar will be available online on our YouTube channel, publicly available, as will the copy, a PDF of the PowerPoint. That'll be available for download on our videos and webinars page. And there's a question here, could someone speak towards the interest or likelihood of standards and procedures for high-intensity soil surveys being further developed?
Yeah, without a doubt, we are heading to that. You know, we were doing landscape level mapping and interpretation of soils. It was not site level. As we move forward, especially using digital techniques and digital tools, and our capacity both to store, manage, and manipulate and display the information, yes, I don't doubt for a moment that we will be moving into a site-specific type of soils information in the future.
And the current manual does speak to that a little bit. That's also in Chapter 4. For those who want to take a look at that, where they talk about Order 1 surveys, the very most detailed level of surveying.
Yeah, I believe that was one of the things that was mentioned to us that we added toward the end to enhance it.
Sean, let me add to that. Basically, the principles are the same for the Order 1 and the highly detailed soil surveys. It's just a matter of scale and intensity and the number of samples that are taken and observations.
Ken, I know you talked about how to get a copy of the manual, but here's a question. Why does the distribution center only allow you to order one book if you need more than one book?
One of the things that we've seen, if you've ever done a search on Amazon, you can find our publications available through other people charging money. So one thing is, we didn't want somebody going out and ordering boxes and then reselling them. Probably more importantly, though, is the fact that we had limited numbers produced. We only produced, 4,500 copies of this particular edition, 5,000 roughly. And we knew of immediately we had 2,000 people who would need it. And so if you need more than one copy, you can certainly get it. Go ahead and submit your request. And a lot of times Alan there at the distribution center will get a hold of me, and when you need more copies, and I know who you are, we will get them to you.
And do they need to do that with a phone call, or is that something they can do with an email?
An email will work just as well, because if they'll fill out the request and enter their information on where they want it shipped, Alan gets a hold of me and says, hey, is it okay if I send a box to this location? And I will see who it is and where it is, and most of the time the answer is yes.
All right, I know we talked about where do they get a copy, but could you go over just one more time, who is the Soil Survey Manual for? Who is it written for?
It's evolved. You know, over time, it was strictly for soil scientists performing soil survey in the early years. I remember one of the pictures from the 1937 manual said it had about tying a handkerchief to the spoke on a wagon wheel and measuring the distance around, and then you would gauge the distance between holes in that method. That was one of the things for the surveyors only at that point. As we evolved with it, it became for people who make the soil surveys, but also the people who are interested in the information that is provided in them. But as we go on in the future, anybody who uses soils information should find this to be an invaluable reference to help explain what it is they are looking at when they're looking at soil survey information. So it's probably geared primarily, though, toward those who are doing research, those who are doing agronomic or environmental type work, as well as soil surveyors.
So here's a question from someone who tried to get a copy from the distribution center. It says that it only allows you to download a PDF or to order a CD. I think they might be at the wrong place.
Wrong page. Wrong page in their website. Yeah.
So they need to go to the NRCS distribution center webpage.
Yeah. I haven't seen this particular one, but the other day I was on the site where you can order
the actual
physical
book.
Physical book, yeah.
Right. So
if you can't find it and you're listening in, give me a call. I'll walk you through it.
Sean, let me follow up. Can you tell if that's an international question? Because this...
No, I don't think so. I think that's
okay.
One of our survey offices.
Because if someone internationally tries to get it, this is what they will encounter.
Yeah.
They probably will not have a hard copy shipped to them, but they can not only download it, they can have a CD physically shipped to them if they want it.
And for others, you know, if you're having trouble getting one, please call Curtis. And we do have a small supply here, and if you're international especially, and you have an interest in our soil survey manual, we would love to put one in your hands. So call us and we'll get you one.
What about those soil scientists around the world that English is not their first language? Are there any plans to generate a translated edition of the manual?
I speak one language pretty good.
It depends on demand. If the demand is generated, then that would be a selling point, that it needs to be in more than one language. But we have to wait to the demand first.
Yeah, and once we publish this, it becomes public domain. So anybody out there who would like to translate it and utilize the information it contains are free to do so. It's part of the public domain.
Well, that about wraps up our question. I'll give people a moment just to see if they have another question they want to put in the Q&A, and I'll look to our presenters. Just one more time, if you could tell us the difference between the Soil Survey Manual and the National Soil Survey Handbook, because I hear people get those two things confused a lot. So the difference between Soil Survey Manual and National Soil Survey Handbook.
Well, let me address this, and I'll turn it over to Ken, but this could be picked up by anyone across the world. This could be picked up by someone in Thailand who wants to make a subaqueous soil survey. It's international and it's scholarly. The handbook is more NRCS agency-centric. It's more not only how to...
National Soil Survey Handbook.
The National Soil Survey Handbook. Not only is it a how-to manual, but it also has a lot of policy and procedures that are very specific for this government agency.
That's basically the truth. You know, the handbook, National Soil Survey Handbook, provides the operational procedures and policies. You know, and you set policies when you have two methodologies that both work well, but you have to choose one, and you want everybody to use that one. Well, that is set by a policy, and that policy is conveyed in the handbook. So in the face of multiple options on how things can be done, the handbook is the document that tells us which one we will use.
Well, Ken, Curtis, I want to thank you for your time and effort to make this presentation. And thanks to all the participants for joining in. We had more than 150 people join today's webinar. The on-demand recording of this webinar will be available on our National Soil Survey Center YouTube channel within a couple of days. So feel free to let your colleagues know about this training.